Welcome everybody. Susie Ben David is going to be presenting for us Sarona today. Susie.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very impressed that all you people came out on a Friday afternoon before Shabbat. I want to thank Judy very much for starting this, and I've learned so much the past few weeks, and appreciate it. So we've learned a lot of very deep things, and today I decided I want to do something a little bit more, I guess you'd say, fun. But it is a part of our history. We're all tour guides, except my husband who's joining. And so we all have, more or less what we've learned, what we studied about the different timelines of this country. So I'm going to pick a very, very small part of it about Sarona. I'm going to focus more or less on the Templars. When I started to do more research and go through notes and different things, I discovered there's a tremendous amount of information. Some of you may have guided there, some of you not. There's lots and lots of stories. I can't touch all of them. I kept going off on tangents, so I'm just kind of giving you a little precursor that I'm not covering everything, but I'm covering as much as I can. So I'm going to start with my PowerPoint, and I'll have to share first. 1 second. Let me share my screen. Okay. Okay, can you see this? Okay, everybody see it?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Fine, I don't have to see anybody. All right, so Sarona, buildings tell their story. So I'm going to start from more recent. In 2005, they've been renovating Sarona. And I'll go through the history of what that was, and finding all kinds of interesting things about the buildings and about the Templars who lived there, but many other people have lived or used Sarona. So basically I'm using the buildings to tell the story. I found this on the internet. Sometimes people come into your life for a moment, a day, or a lifetime. We've heard this. It doesn't, it doesn't matter how much time they spent with you. So again, as I said, Sarona, the Templars themselves were here about 80 years. But they made a very big impact for Palestine at the time, which was during the Ottoman times. So just a bit of a timeline of Sarona. I'm going to go through it very, very quickly. If you want, I can send this to anybody who wants it. In 1861, this Templar society was founded called the Temple Gesellschaft in Germany. And they decided that the Christianity was corrupted. The temple is in your heart. You have to come to the Holy Land in order to bring about the second coming of the Messiah. So they first came to Haifa in 1868. 1869, they bought land. I'll show you pictures in a minute of what was the American colony that they came in 1866. And the third community was Sarona. And they bought land. These were people who started off in Haifa. Some went to Jaffa, but they wanted agriculture. They wanted to grow crops, and so they bought a lot more land than in Haifa and Jaffa. Just to kind of put in the dates, the Kaiser Wilhelm II came to visit in 1898, as we know about the story with Herzl. And at that time, they decided, he gave money, and they built Wilhelma, which was one of the towns, and that's now Bnei Tarot. 1914, I'm going to skip ahead. 1914, World War I starts. At this time, we've got the British mandate here, and the British felt that the Germans were enemies, so they sent them, by 1917, 1918, they sent 850 of the Templars to Egypt. After World War I finished, they were allowed to return. They came back to a big balagan and a mess. Everything that they had planted, all the animals they had, and different things they had were pretty much ruined, and they rebuilt. But 1939, World War II begins. A lot of the Germans, we'll talk again later about that, a lot of the Germans had Nazi sympathy, so the Templars were kicked out again. Well, first they were interred, and then they were slowly sent out. And by 1950, they were left. That was the last ones. Who started this? Christoph Hoffman, George David Hardegg. Again, they believed that the temple is where your heart is, and these are the two people started. They had a misunderstanding between Hoffman and Hardegg, so really only Hoffman came. Just a nice picture, the postcard of the Haifa Templar community. This is below the Baha'i, actually the Baha'i decided to build it above the Templar community because they had seen this lovely community. You can see the nice houses, red roofs, we're familiar with them, also in the German colony in Jerusalem. And behind it is the land, but it's not a lot of land behind it, you'll notice that. On the other picture is a picture of the German, the German colony, what they called it in Jaffa. So the American colony was, George Adams came with 157 people. People got sick. They brought their own houses, wooden houses. It was built differently than the Templar communities. And after a year or two, George Adams, who was a drunk and a lout and a liar and a cheat and all that, he basically ran the place into the ground. They left, but they sold it, most of it, to the Germans. Okay, so just a bit of a background about Germany. I'm just telling you, this is very weird talking to my computer. I'll do the best I can. So the early days of Sarona, the picture on top is basically showing how they had their houses. The street, it's hard to tell here, but the street was done in a cross because they were Christian. And they had all the fields in the back. If you think about Moshavim of today, it's very similar, that the houses are along a row of a street and the fields are behind. This was begun by the Templars in Sarona. The picture on the right, you could also see just how horrible the dirt was. Why did they pick here? A number of reasons, actually. There's three different types of soil in Sarona, in the area, but one of them is sandy soil, and they could grow grapes here. Why did they grow grapes? They tried other things, and the Arabs kept stealing their crops, but Muslims don't drink wine, so they planted grapes, and lo and behold, wasn't stolen. So, but they did grow other crops as well. They were very diligent. They were very skilled. They brought a lot of modern technology. When they came, they brought a lot of agricultural equipment. Not all of it worked for here. They originally brought vines from Germany, which did not take. It took a while to figure out that they should follow what the Jews were doing, which was later on, and they got their grapevines from France. So think about Rothschild. One of the things we can discover here is that Sarona's on a hill. Now, I always think that Tel Aviv is flat, but as Judy and I know, we went bike riding in Tel Aviv last fall, and our last part was coming up to go back to the train station, the Hashalom train station, which is right past Sarona, and it was a hard uphill drive. So I can attest to it that it's definitely uphill. It's also along what they used to be called Wadi Musrara, and we had Musrara in Jerusalem as well. Wadi Musrara means graceful, was Nachal Ayalon. So you had water of Nachal Ayalon. They used that water for irrigating, which was a new idea to bring water in channels to irrigate, but there was malaria. So they did have problems. They did have a lot of disease in the beginning. Many people died, especially kids, but they were steadfast and stayed on. Another reason was the korkar, the sandstone was very easy to dig. They would dig out basements, because this is what you had in Germany. Again, I'll mention that later when I look at the houses closer up. And they used the korkar in order to build, so it was easy to dig. So they used all the different resources that they had in Sarona. Even though it looks like it's pretty crummy, it actually was quite good for their uses. They were the first people to come to, at the time, Palestine, Ottoman Palestine, and most farmers were self-sustaining. If you're self-sustaining, you raise your own chickens and you have a couple of cows for your milk. Maybe you make some cheese. Maybe you'll trade with your neighbors a little bit, but they basically brought commerce, and they grew in order to sell and to export. So you've got here some nice pictures. The pictures you see on the, let me just change my, my pointer to the laser pointer. We'll see closer up more of these pictures, but these two are wineries. They weren't just making, people back then usually just made wine for themselves. Of course, not the Arabs, but the Jews might have in the old Yishuv. But here they were actually exporting them out to Germany. Down here, you've also got a nice picture of what, Colony Sarona, Beit Jaffa, Palestina. Over here, this was actually a paper that wrapped their oranges. The Arabs were the first ones actually that were growing the oranges, but the Templars took it to a higher level and they exported them. Now it says here Sarona Wilhelmina. At first they were growing the oranges in Sarona. After they were kicked out the first time, World War I, and came back, Wilhelmina by then was up and running, and so they grew the grapes in Wilhelmina, and Sarona started growing the oranges. So we've got this connection of Sarona Wilhelmina, and there was a co-op with a lot of things. what did they do? So one of the things they did was they played tennis. They had a tennis court. This over here is an outdoor bowling alley. This exists still today. When they renovated Sarona, they discovered it and they fixed it up. If you'll notice over here, this is where your bowling ball comes rolling down. I presume they bowled over here. Someone kind of rolled the bowl back. And they drank beer. So if you go to Sarona, when it reopens again, right past this bowling alley is a pub. And they're selling beer there as well. So they're trying to repeat some of the things. So let's look at some of the houses here. First of all, Theodore Sandel, who some of you may know, was very, very well known as an architect, and he designed Sarona. We know about his home in Jerusalem, where we have the Sleepy Lion on Emek Faim Street, and he designed Zichron Yaakov. We know about the shul. Maybe we don't know about the shul. The shul in Zichron Yaakov was built by the Templars because they knew how to build. They came here with all kinds of different skills. At the time, the people living in Palestine didn't have these kind of skills. So each person seemed to have a different skill. So you had a butcher, and you had the baker, and you had the carpenter, and you had the horsemith, and you had them making wine, and you had them making beer. Everybody was doing something else, and they were working together as a community. That was their emphasis, is working as a community to show the world, this is how you have to have a community, and the Messiah will come because of it. This is the first building they built. It's called the Community Hall. It was built in winter of 1873. And if you'll take a look, my husband noticed this blue arrow over here that there is a British phone box there. So we know that this was probably 1920s, 1930s, that this picture was taken then. This is during the renovations. You can see it's not quite done yet. There's a lot of balagan around the sides of these pictures that I found off the internet. The shutters, the windows, the little windows up here, they're all part of the style that they brought with them, the Templars. So if you take a look, you'll see that there's steps going up. They had basements. You know, most people these days, we don't have basements. Israel didn't dig, but in Germany, they had basements. They kept their animals down there, or maybe workshops down there. So you can see over here, these little windows. That's for when you're in the basement, you can get some natural light. And in Germany, you've got snow on the ground in the winter. So you need steps to go to your front door. You don't want your front door to be blocked by the snow, as well as the peaked roof, which of course, if it snows, you don't want a flat roof. The flat roofs in Israel had to have a lot of maintenance, where these had less, but they don't make these tiles. So they had to bring them in from Marseille, from France. This was the second community hall. So what I wanted to show here is that this was one building that was used at different periods of time, the periods I showed you on the timeline, at different times. So at first it was a community hall. This is the inauguration. This is the place where you had weddings, where your funerals left from, where parties, anything, their holidays, they had, everything was happening here. You see they're all dressed up in white, and they have their carriage and horses, and that was the main community hall. But in the 1940s, when the British took over, they used it as a military camp. At first, there was a detention camp for after before they actually exiled the Germans. There were 7 communities. They put them all into 4 different communities and put barbed wire around them. And once they kicked them out, they exiled them, they used it as a military base. So this was used as a cinema. They gave it over in December 1947 to the Haganah, which is surprising because so many places they gave over to the Arabs, but in this case, they gave Sarona to the Haganah. And they used it for, at first, as shul, as you can see, you can read on the bottom, and later as a restaurant cafeteria for the IDF. And the IDF used this from 1947 until about 2005, when they started doing the renovations, and now it's part of the Sarona market. Sarona market, called Ganei Sarona, the area. So once they started going into the houses, a lot of them were in very bad condition. I'm not going to go into it, but there was about 20, 30 years of deciding on what to do. And even in the middle 70s, they were thinking they should tear it down. What should we do with it? It was being used by the IDF. It was, the Shabak had offices here, the Matkal, Shabak, Matkal, Gavati started here. So there was a lot of different army and government offices all around Sarona. As we may know, there's the Kiryah, which was named by Ben Gurion. So they started doing renovations, and they started scraping away some of the paint, and they discovered, if you take a look, follow my laser, they have these beautiful stenciled paint. And this is just basically, they kind of give an idea of what the furniture may have looked like then, and the pictures that they had, and the beautiful floors. Here you can get a closer up of the different kinds of stencils. They took, once they realized there were these paintings underneath, and I guess the British and then the Israelis painted over all this stuff, they scraped away and found dozens. This is only a few of them. They found dozens of these beautiful stencils. They believe they were done by either Arab workers or Jewish workers. Over here is just, this is they have a visitor center. So the visitor center, I took a picture of some of the floor tiles, very, very beautiful floor tiles. We see them in all over in the German colony in Jerusalem as well, and they become very, very popular. People, I have them in my bathroom, not these specifically, but it's something that it was very, very beautiful. And this is more the next generation. There were 3 generations of Templars. The original ones that came, the second generation, the third generation, we'll talk about a little after. Another house to show you, this is Buckley Roxas house, built in the 1870s. He was the blacksmith. So this is the house, as you can see, it's still being renovated, but this is the original house back then. This house had a weather vane, a horse weather vane on top, but most weather vanes actually had chickens on them, or a rooster. Why is that? Because it has to do with Peter being told by Jesus that, by the time the cock crows 3 times, you're going to deny me. And so Christians have a rooster on their weather vane. But in this case, because he was a blacksmith, so Buckley put a horse instead. Later on, it was used as military advocate general house, everything. Again, all these houses over time, even during the Templar time, if you think about it, they were here 80 years. It wasn't always the same family. Maybe they sold, they bought. Many of them had between 7 and 14 children, very from. And so they had to go somewhere. Some of them, moved in the house, they sold, bought, moved to other communities. So it wasn't like static, 80 years, this family, but that's the way it goes. This was one of my favorite houses. This is the Beit Havad. It's the post office. If you look over here, there's this little clock. So it seems that when they were renovating this building, they found in the attic, they found the mechanism for the clock, which you can find here on the right, the mechanism for the clock, and the clock itself was in a crate in the attic, and it was in really bad condition. They happened to be having an exhibit on the Templars in the Eretz Yisrael Museum, and a woman who was a descendant of one of the Templars walked by and she recognized the name Heinrich Perot, the name of the company, and they got in touch with them, and it seems that it would be very, very expensive to build a new one, but they did redo the one that you see up here is redone with a electric mechanism. But over here in the visitor center, you can see that the original was repaired by someone named Mordechai Geva, who that's his hobby. He was an Air Force pilot, but he just likes repairing very old, intricate clocks. We have a story about the bells. If you can see here, there's a bit of a bell here. There was actually on top of the building, you can't see over here, but there was a big bell on the top of the building, and they chimed every hour. And it seems that when Moshe Dayan was in the Kiryah working, he discovered them on the ground and he took them home. So on the left-hand side, you can see a picture of the 2 bells. This is in Dayan's residence in Sahala. Once they realized where the bells were, by then his wife, Ruth, they had divorced, she moved out, they sold the house, but Shai Farkash and Tamar Tuchler, who you see here, they were very much involved in the renovations. They went to the family there and they basically took pictures, and they found Ruth Dayan and also showed them all kinds of pictures of the garden and people with the bells. So they returned the bells, which are here. There were probably more of them, these chimes, but this is the 2 that they found. On the back of the building, you can find this little post box because this was the post office. So that's kind of a recreated little post box over there. And so this also became the post box, is the post office as well. 1 second. Okay. So this building, though, flew a swastika for about 7 years. So what happened was, I can't quite get the picture, but 1937, Adolf Eichmann came to visit Palestine. He was looking for a place to exile the Jews to. This is like not well-known story, but the British didn't trust him. He came in disguised as a journalist with someone else, but the British weren't quite sure, you know, if they would let him come in. He was allowed to stay for a day and then go back on a ship to go back. In that day, he went to Haifa. Somehow, Buckley Wagner, who was like head of the area, who was at the time friendly with the Jews, must have had a conversation with Eichmann and became the head of the Nazi party. So this building was attacked by the Irgun. They were hoping to get and kill a lot of the Nazis there, but some reason the timing was wrong and they injured 6 people lightly, including Gottlieb Wagner. That was in 1943. In 1946 or 7, Naomi Neumann managed to assassinate him. He was on the way to Lod Airport, so he was assassinated. So we've got a lot of, so how did the Nazis come in this era? First of all, they're German. And they were sending their children, the 2nd generation, 3rd generation, were being sent to Germany to study. And the Nazi party was getting more and more prevalent. And they came home with these ideas. The older generation were not happy. They did not like this idea. When Hitler first said to boycott Jewish businesses in Germany, they actually, the Templars actually sent a request, please don't do that because then we won't have business with the Jews here in Palestine. But of course, that didn't happen. So that's our connection there. It seemed that in 1935, there were 250 Nazi party members in all of Palestine at the time. And by 1938, there were 330. 17% of the Germans that were living in the land at the time were Nazi sympathizers. So that's their connection over there. So here we've got a picture of the butcher. There's a famous story. As I said, there's lots and lots of stories, but I'm going to just talk about this story. This is Grossinger, which cracked me up because I know some of you may have been to Grossinger's. I have this cookbook actually. Grossinger's upstate New York is one of these old hotels that people used to go to in the summer. But this Grossinger wasn't Jewish. He was the butcher. He was the local butcher, and he was upset. Why weren't the Jews buying meat from him? So he spoke to one of his Jewish friends. He said, look, you have to have a shochet. You have to have it slaughtered by Jewish rituals. And he said, okay. So he went to speak to a shochet, and he said, okay, come next Wednesday, and you'll come to my slaughterhouse, and you'll do what you have to do. Of course, he walks in, takes him to the back room. He sees 3 little pigs. It wasn't going to happen. So that's just basically his house, and that's the butcher. All right, so I'm going to move on to the winery. This is one of the more interesting buildings. This is an old picture of the winery. You can see the barrels on the outside. House was a bit different. This was a co-op. And so this took up, they used up a lot more land, and they built a much bigger house. So you've got these double gabled roof of the building. These are 2 of the labels that they had. If you look closely, you'll see Wilhelmina Sarona, Sarona Jaffa, Palestina, again, a co-op. This is vermouth wine. They exported the wine to Germany, and it was quite well known. So the building looks like this today. There's a restaurant on top, and they've repainted what says on here, Deutsche Weinbau, my German's terrible, Deutsche Weinbau Genossenschaft, which is the cooperative. And that was one of them. There was a smaller one as well we'll get to in a minute. And if you can see over here, there's actually an elevator, but there's steps to go down. And today there is a whiskey bar. This is kosher actually, with 150 whiskeys from all around the world. You can buy it by the glass, you can buy it by the bottle. I've seen the price list. Yeah, it's expensive. So this is, if you look at the building, the shape of this room, they basically dug into the porcar, into the sandstone, and they made 2 halls like this. This is one of them. There's the other one is right next to it. And what do they do here? So let's go back a second. So this was used, now it's a whiskey bar. What was it used in between? So, sorry. For a short time, in December, as I said, December 1947, the British gave the base over to the Haganah. So we had no airplanes. We had very little ammunition. We had another 5 months until the War of Independence. We're actually in the middle of the local War of Independence. And not too far from here, near Rehovot, was a base called Akir, which is Ekron. And they had an Air Force base. There was also one called the Tel Aviv Air Force Base, which today is Sde Dov. There was another one in Yavna'el, and later on in Nir Am by the Haganah. So this is, what happened was they in the airbase of Akir, they want to get rid of, they had all these surplus airplanes. They're called, they're Austers, we call them Primus, which is similar to the Primus stoves that made a lot of noise and were kind of built, they make a lot of noise. So these sort of these. So they took them apart. Unfortunately, the British sabotaged them in a way so that they couldn't really be used as they were on purpose. And they took them apart, put them on 10 trucks, and brought them to Sarona in order to put them underneath into the winery and rebuild them under so that the British can't see what was going on, because they wouldn't be very happy about this. The next day, they also came in with more parts coming through, and there was a Jeep that was leading the group, but there was an Arab ambush, and 7 people were killed. So so here's just pictures of showing them. Of course, you can't put together a whole airplane inside that hall. Just go back up again. You can't put a whole airplane in here. It's no room for the wings. But they put them together. They put up some camouflage netting outside next to the winery, and they were able to rebuild it. And then they basically took it apart again, put them back on trucks, took them to Stadov, put them back together, because they needed to have, again, you cannot take them by truck, and you can't fly them from Sarona. You need to have the airfield. So these are just really cool pictures. If you look over here, this is the stamp with the Oster and a coin, 67, 2001. So, you know, we're very proud of this is our first Air Force. If you think about it, this is the first modern Jewish Air Force in the world that started here in Sarona. When you're still down there at the bottom, there's a tunnel. If you look here clearly, I think it's really cool to see the sandstone, how they carved it. When you see the houses, those are plastered. But here, they didn't need to plaster it, but there's this big long hallway, and you get to this end with this pole. You can walk around this thing, either with animals or the barrels were rolled around here. Not 100% sure, but it's a long tunnel to get here. And so this is just part of, so if you want to go to see this, it used to be that you could just go in up until Sarona, up until Corona, you would go to the visitor center and get a key, say you're a tour guide, you want to take a group, and they would let you take a key and go. The other side, when you come up, you can actually come up through this building. This is the second winery. It's called Distillery or Mizkaka. And so this is a smaller one. Here they would, they made more things like beer, arak, brandy. They had different kinds of liquor besides the wine. So now it's a very upscale restaurant. But underneath, they discovered some interesting things. The British didn't use this building. This is at the far southern end of Sarona. This was not included in the detention camp or the British base, so it wasn't used. But it was used as a printing press. It was only used as a brewery for about 7 years, from 1925. So after that, it became a printing press for their local use. The IDF used it for a little while. In the beginning, Haganah used it just for print local flyers and things like that. But what was interesting is the first stamps were printed here because the Templars, when they were exiled, they left behind all the machinery. They couldn't take it with them. So if you take a look today, what's today's Hebrew date? It's Zion ER. Look at this date, Zion ER, 16/5/1948, 2 days. So if you think about it, Friday, Declaration of Independence, Shabbat is Shabbat. Sunday is the first day that you can actually mail a letter. So you can see here that they've made sure to use old ancient coins that are connected to our Israeli history. So you've got here from Mered Rishon, the 4th year of Mered Rishon. I think this is one of the coolest things. First day cover. Again, Hayom Rishon Shel Hador HaIvri. This is fabulous. This is like the first time you've got mail going out. And today's the anniversary. It just happens to work out that way. So that's very cool. Eventually, it continued to be the place where they printed. It was a print house for the government. And they ended up also minting coins here from 1950 till 1963. Now we don't know where they mint the coins or make money because they sent it abroad, and we do not know which country it's from. Just to get an idea of the house, this is one of the nicer houses that they've renovated. Helene and Horst Koper, they were the owners of that printing shop. Now, it then became an IDF maintenance unit. Take a look again here. You can see the steps down to the basement, steps going up because of the snow, which we don't have. Beautiful shutters redone and the lighting, everything. They've really done a nice job with the restoration, trying very hard to keep keep the way it was. You can't see in this picture, but if some of the buildings have a second floor that have outdoor elevators built on the outside, they didn't want to put elevators inside. They're trying to preserve as much as they can. If some of the buildings are stores, so you go in, you're basically on a raised layer. They don't even want, like, and you can't put things on the walls like air conditioners or pictures. They're very, very careful of how the store owners had to keep preserving of the house. All right, so the next interesting thing is the Beit Bad, the olive press. So this was owned by Christian Flugfelder. I love that name. So Christian Flugfelder lived in the house next door. You can kind of see it right through back here where my pointer is. That was his house. Notice that there's no plaster on the buildings. All the barns and the workshops and things like that they didn't bother plastering. But this is the building, and it wasn't used by the British, and it wasn't used so much by the IDF. A little bit maybe for classrooms, but they discovered all the works. Now, what's interesting is that this is the only hydraulic olive press that we've found in the country. Don't know if there were others. Everything was imported from Germany, but it wasn't really meant for olives. It was meant for seeds, and it was meant for grains. But they managed to change it so it was able to. As you'll notice here, the leather belts here, everything you push, everything was run by diesel. And this was a very unique and upgraded modern idea that the Templars brought. Now it can be worked by electricity. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute because I want to show you a little moving. I have to stop sharing and then share again. Oh, now I can see everybody again. How you guys doing? Okay, 1 second. Get that. Okay, all right, so let me share again. Where did I do that? Share. Okay, this is, so inside, if any of you've seen it, it's about a 10-minute movie. It's really, really cool. Again, hopefully post Sarona, you can go to the visitor center and get the key, go in. When there was a restaurant and it closed about 6 months ago, if you had a cup of coffee or ate something, that you see it for free. If you didn't want to pay to eat, they charge you like 10 shekels. So this is just a kind of a trailer. So take a look. Sorry, start again. So that's just kind of cute. Let me go back to Sharon. I'll find you again. Okay. Oh gosh, I have to turn that off. 1 second. Okay. No. Okay. Am I up to? Okay. Can everybody see that? Yes? Judy?
You're good.
Okay, fine. Thank you. All right, so this is Isaac Isidore Mamlok. So he was Jewish, and he came from Germany. He studied to be a chemist. What's interesting about Isaac Memlock was he was a homeopath and a naturopath. He was working and had his own pharmacy in Germany, and became friends with Chaim Weizmann and Herzl, and he got the Zionist bug. He ended up coming to Israel, and because he spoke German, he was requested by the people of Sarona, the Templars, to open up a pharmacy. Unfortunately, that building was one of the ones that didn't survive. There were about 90 buildings when they started restoration, only 32 survived. So here he is in his pharmacy. He also had one in Givatayim, so I'm not sure if this picture is the Givatayim one or the Sarona one, but he was an interesting guy. When World War I broke out, all the all the Templars were exiled at the time to Egypt before they came back. So he went back to Germany. He ended up being a chemist there as well, opened up a shop, worked in a German hospital. And then when they came back, he came back to Israel and at first worked in the German hospital in Yaffo. So in Sarona, they asked him to come back to open the pharmacy again in 1925, and he was there until 1939 when they left. So what's interesting about him was that he really was into natural homeopath and naturopath remedies. He would go to the Dead Sea and get minerals to bring back. There were 1,300 eucalyptus trees brought in by the Templars in order to drain the swamps. And he discovered that if you boil the leaves, they were remedies for stomach ailments. And he had a garden, and he had a big garden full of all kinds of flowers and herbs. So this is down the bottom. You can see this is a recreated herb garden, which is very nice. In front of his pharmacy, he had planted 2 Washingtonian trees. So here's a picture of the Washingtonian trees that are still here. We see them all over, so the Templars had brought them in. What I like about this picture also, you see this old renovated house, but you also see this tall, tall building. So you're basically getting the old and the new all together in the area. I always think that's a very cool thing to see. So you can see a little bit more of the plants here, but this was the area where his pharmacy stood, but it didn't last. So this is just a basic area of a cute picture of just showing you. This is now David Elazar Street. And that was named for Dado. It used to be called Christoph Hoffman, named for the Templar. This was called By the Sea or via Derech Hayam. I don't know exactly what it would be in English, but now it's Kaplan for Eliezer Kaplan. On this side, which you can't see, I couldn't really get any pictures, is the Kiryat, what we call the Kiryat today. So most of this was part of Sarona, but across the street as well. So if you're walking by, you can kind of look over the fence of the Kiryat. So that the name of the Kiryat was named Machane Yoshua, after Yeshua Globerman, who was a Haganah commander who was killed in 1947. In 1996, it got renamed as Machane Rabin, after Yitzhak Rabin. So you can actually see they've renovated now recently, the past couple of years, they've renovated some of the houses. I know that there was Hishlamut there, which I missed on a Friday. I know some people have gone to that. You'll notice back here, this little house back here. So this was the brewery, and that was not part of the camp. So that's kind of tucked over there. This is where the winery is. Over here is the Beit Bad. And these houses. Now, what's interesting about this, though, Kaplan Street, it's a main street. It goes off to Derech Begin and ends up crossing over, going to the Ayalon and the train station, the Hashalom train station. It wasn't a very wide street. It was okay, but they needed to widen it. And they were worried, what do we do? All these houses are on the way. So they actually moved them. They moved 5 of the houses. And I'm going to show you that. Here's a picture of them showing the houses. What they did was they, before they moved them, they rebuilt the foundations in the area further south, and then they moved them. So we're going to show you another video. I have to stop sharing and start again. I always have to say this. Now I have to start again. Okay, right. Okay. This is a very quick timed thing to show you how this took 6 hours to move the house. You look on the left behind the tree, you will see the foundation that they prepared in advance. You can see the old one now on the other side, and they're basically, they're showing it, just going to loop it over and over again just to show you how they brought it and took 6 hours. This is only one of them. And they moved 5 houses like that. Okay. All right, that's kind of cool. Let me get out of that. Second. Back to sharing. Sorry, I talked to myself. Okay. All right, so that's how they moved the house. Get an idea as well. They were in pretty bad condition. They moved it, renovated it, and that's kind of cool. All right, so what is it now? Sarona Market. If you've been to Sarona Market, it's just this upscale market with all kinds of food, kosher, not kosher, it's closed now. Somebody who works in my husband's office, who I've known for over 20 years, she lives in one of the tall buildings. This is basically in the market, a list of all the different stores they've got. Some of the yummies that you've got here, this stuff, if you look at it, you put on £2 just to look at it. This is the same store that we have in the Machane Yehuda market, the Mamlechet Trina. So they've got also a, let me put it back to my pointer. This is the same kind of Syrian basalt stone as we see in the Machane Yehuda market. This guy over here, for some reason, whenever I try to take a picture, he yells at me and doesn't let me, so somebody was able to take a picture here. This is a little bit of indoors. It's very, very busy because it's across the street from the Kiryah. It's not far from the train station. It's always busy. The lines, people are lined up, you know, lunchtime, I'd say between 12 and 3. It's very, very, very busy. Some really nice shops. It's just very popular. Just an overall picture of what Sarona looks like. Again, these buildings, these 3 buildings are apartment buildings. This is one of them where my friend lives in. These are not built yet. This was the very, very expensive parking lot. I think they charged 60 shekel an hour, so people were outraged. But now, last time Judy and I were there was a very big hole, so these are not up yet. This building now houses all the government offices that were originally over here, and then some. If you go down off the other side, across the street from here, catty cornered, is where the Hashalom train station is. All right, so I think that's it. That one I was going to just show you that next to the distillery was in Antilla. I didn't know if I'd have time because I'm running late, so I added at the end. This was basically, they didn't know what it was at first, and they discovered at the end that these little boxes basically went down to the well. There were a lot of wells here, and this is now an electric mechanism in order to bring the water down, but back then they used animals. And I'm done. So just to get an idea of, let me just go back to stop sharing. All right. How do I get here?
Susie, that was wonderful. Thank you very much. Very interesting and nice. Please look to see if there's anything in the chats that you can respond to.
Oh, there's 7 chats. Okay, I didn't look before. Everybody, original weather. No, it's not the original. I could not find it. I actually asked my friend who lives there, could you go around and take pictures for me? So some of those pictures actually she took, and she couldn't find it. She couldn't find it. She didn't know where to look, I think, or it could be that it's not there. Diane was known for his activities. That's true. True, but if the period is not under 2, okay, fine. That's true too, but they gave him back. Yes, okay, thank you very much. Where does one park a large van? I have no idea. I don't have an eshkol. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm hoping that some of this information, when you guide people, you're obviously going to go into the depth of it, but if you can, know to go to this building and look at point at this and point at that, it kind of makes it more interesting to hear the stories. We know the stories of the gold coins. I didn't mention the gold coins. Across the street in the Kiryah, there's a whole story. If you haven't heard it, 23 gold coins were found because they were renovating, and they got in touch with the owner's son, Hugo Wenegal, and his 97-year-old father. Hugo Wenegal was a 97-year-old who his father had buried it when they went to exile. They live in Australia, and they found it. There was a whole rigmarole. Who does it belong to? Because Israel actually bought the land of Sarona and all the houses from the British. So who does it belong to? So they decided it really belongs to the Australian guy, and so he got it back. And I think they have a Templar museum in Melbourne, and that's where they have some of the coins. Anyway, any other questions? Anybody want to ask anything? All right, so Shabbat Shalom.
Very much.
I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed getting it all together.
All right, guys, very good. We'll see you on Sunday morning with
It was wonderful.